Hello, friends. My guest today is a Navy veteran, mapmaker, and political enthusiast. He spent around 6 years evaluating satellite imagery from a Navy ship, checking photos over and over to determine if there was any imminent threat. He has sailed around the tip of South America, lived in many locations up and down the West Coast, currently stitches high-resolution photos taken from a Cessna and creates maps, and is an extremely intelligent resource for all things political. I had a wonderful time sitting down with my friend Dean Olson. Here he is. Where did you grow up?
Already starting with the hard questions. I kind of grew up all up and down the West Coast is usually what I say to people. Okay. I was born in Southern California in the Orange County area. Okay. Lived in Garden Grove. You know, there's a Sublime song about it, and all true. But shortly after that, we moved up to northern Washington and lived in Bellingham area for, a good chunk of time till I was about 13 years old. Okay. And then from there, I wound up down in Southern California again, back in southern Orange County that time. And that's where I went to high school, and I guess sort of that was the period of time growing up. So, I like to say that I was just a West Coaster from the start.
Did you enjoy Southern California, or were you upset that you had to leave Washington?
I was upset that I had to leave Washington. I mean, it was a time in my life when it would be difficult for any kid to have to sort of uproot and get out, kind of leave behind all your friends and try to have to make new ones. And then, we weren't really in the same one place in Southern California. So, we lived in Claremont, which is like East LA County, lived there for a little while, about 10 months, and then moved again to Southern Orange County in San Clemente. And that's, I can think about, different ways in which I was excited to be, going back to California at that age. But also, was really sad to have to leave friends and then, struggled to make new friends. So it was a weird sort of moving around situation. I don't know how many people experience that, having to move at kind of various times in that early of an age, but it's not super easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably easier when you're younger, but once you reach like high school age, you don't really want to uproot and disappear from all those friends, right? Because you're just like establishing your core group of individuals to hang out with. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. And, I did leave San Clemente. In some ways, it gets easier to keep moving around as you, if you've done it so much when you're younger. And I remember feeling, sort of early on when I was like 13, 14, having to move from Washington to California, feeling, like combination of like excitement and dread about it, but then almost like a restlessness when I hit like 19, 20. And, from there, I mean, I lived in San Francisco after that. I lived, I was in the Navy for some time, and that, sort of took me over to the East Coast and down south too. So, it was sort of, it was a restlessness that wasn't, like very easy to describe, but it was always kind of something that I needed to keep doing, or an excitement of seeing a new place once you kind of feel like you've used up that old one. Mm-hmm.
Was it a culture shock going from Washington to Southern California? I imagine Southern California is just seems like, depending on what neighborhood you were in, it would be more maybe a higher income, certain people versus, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. It was interesting because we did kind of go from being sort of upper middle class in Ferndale, which was the actual town that we lived in, sort of a Bellingham suburb, to, I guess, lower middle class in San Clemente, which, like a lot of my friends lived in very large, houses, McMansions and planned communities and stuff like that. And, we lived in an apartment. So it's a little bit of a culture shock, and in some ways kind of opens the door to thinking about class before you can even really have that sort of articulated to you. You sort of see, you go from living one way among other people to living a completely different way, or at least seeing yourself as having a different kind of quality of life or status, at like the high school age.
Yeah. So what pushed you, or what what helped you decide to go into the Navy from there? You finished up high school and then you went directly in?
I did not go directly in after high school. I didn't really do anything directly after high school. I spent a little bit of time working at a liquor store, I didn't really have ambitions. I took the year off immediately after college and then tried to go to San Francisco State. And I did that for a year and basically flunked out really within the first year. I think my first semester freshman year GPA was like 1.2 something,
Wow.
sort of kind of indicating to me, maybe try something else.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of fun in San Francisco. Maybe that had something to do with it too. But I wasn't I wasn't really a kid with ambitions. I didn't have an idea of what I wanted to do, for like a future. I think I was at San Francisco State for like electrical engineering because it makes money, I guess, like it's something that smart people do, I suppose. But
Well, that's a difficult thing for any 18-year-old. In my opinion, like, how are you supposed to know what you're going to do forever when you're that young? Like, your brain hasn't even finished developing, and they expect you to choose a school, choose a profession, go anywhere from like $40,000 to $200,000 in debt. And most people, they finish school and then they don't even use their degree.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
And the stakes are so high too, it's sort of like, don't mess that up, like we're going to simultaneously acknowledge that, 18-year-olds are kind of dumb and don't know what to do, but also like, here's a really important choice that you can't screw up.
Exactly.
Go forth and do great things.
Yeah.
And so, I think I felt that kind of pressure when I was picking things. As far as like majors, I probably would have gone into like an English major, done something literature related because that was sort of my actual interest. I read a lot of books as a kid.
But you were concerned that you wouldn't be able to find a job doing it.
Yeah, I think that was primarily my my motivation for thinking something like electrical engineering, which was so short lived. I never even considered that after I failed out and left San Francisco State after that first year.
So what path would you end up taking if you were an electrical engineer?
I don't even think I got far enough in the program to know what people do in that kind of a job. I think, and this is so long ago, I was 19 when I started the first semester at San Francisco State, and then, history intervening, and then I didn't go back to school again until I was 29, a good 10 years later. So,
Wow.
Part of it is that all that time is kind of like lost to me a little bit. I kind of hardly remember like what was, sort of in the academics, what I was being taught in classes, what they were telling me you can do with this sort of degree.
Yeah.
Probably because I wasn't even really going all that much. I wasn't interested. And I think that was sort of an early lesson to me. And, needing to be really, I guess all in on something, on a subject, if this is going to be like a subject that you spend time studying and mastering to I guess get you a job sometime down the road. It's like if you're not studying and mastering it through your sheer interest, it's going to be really hard to go into the library every day.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said you had a 1 point something GPA and you flunked out, and I mean, what did you do after that? You just decided that wasn't for you, and you left San Francisco?
Yeah, I left San Francisco and I moved down to the San Fernando Valley in the Los Angeles area. I moved in with some friends of mine from high school, and they were going to State Northridge. But, that was kind of my compromise. Like, probably should have moved home, but I moved, closer to home with some friends of mine, kind of trying to stay independent. I really wanted to be in a city. That was part of it. I was very tired of living in suburban Southern California, Orange County, but the San Fernando Valley wasn't much of a compromise. So I was always kind of trying to get into the city and spend time in LA, and just being, closer to it than I would have been at my parents' house in San Clemente was good enough. And I had a good time down in the valley, but also was just still kind of equally, uninterested in anything in particular. Didn't really have any goals or plans or, any strong interests. I was just gaming a lot, really, at that period of my life, and just wound up floating. Did okay enough at community college to have gotten like a transfer certificate out of it. But, you know, once I hit that point, I was sort of faced again with this choice, like, what am I going to do? You know, still, I'm only like 20, 21 at the time. Kind of, I think, still a little too young to have to be making that kind of decision. And so I was just working, you know, shitty jobs at coffee shops, working at Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf. I worked at a Claim Jumper, Western-themed steakhouse.
Yeah, they got some good shoestring fries.
Oh, they do. All 4,000 calories per serving. It's a hoot.
Yeah.
But, you know, didn't really have much going on, and that kind of explains what sort of drove my decision to join the Navy. Is that, you know, I once I finished that transfer requirement, I was looking at schools, and I was like thinking more seriously about like English programs and things that would have been more interesting to me. But also just looking at the price tag, you know, looking at all the money that was going to be required to have to do that, and not really sure if it was worth the investment, you know. So it's just a hard position to be in when you're also being told, like, well, if you don't go to college, you're going to be poor the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So,
but when you join the service like that, they pay for college, don't they?
And that was kind of part of the calculus.
Sure.
But really, what got me into the Navy, I guess the truth is that a good friend of mine, or my good friend's cousin, who I knew kind of prior to, you know, seeing him again when he came back in town. I was in this period of time where I was trying to figure out where to go to school, what to go to school for, living with my mom and not really, you know, feeling like I'm moving forward in any way.
Yeah.
So I started hanging out with this guy. He has, you know, a lot of time off. We were just chilling. I was listening to his old sea stories and, you know, all the interesting kinds of stuff that's happened to him. And, you know, I was just kind of like, I need some stories like that in my life, and I don't know how I'm going to get them. I don't know, you know, where I can go or what I can do to do that, you know. And oh, by the way, you know, like it's not like I get nothing out of that. If I were to go, you know, into the Navy, I could get college money and kind of solve this other thing that's hanging over my head at the time. And so I sort of made the decision on kind of short notice, sort of told the recruiter, like, you know, I'm in if you get me in as fast as you can. But I you know, I need to ship, and I need you to give me something that's gonna, you know, like a job that's gonna work for me. So I basically, like 3 weeks after I walked in the office, I was getting on a bus, going down to the San Diego airport, and flew out to Chicago O'Hare for boot camp. And I was 22 at the time.
Are they less likely to take a 22-year-old versus an 18 or 19-year-old? Like, are they kind of like, old guy here signing up for the Navy?
Yeah, you know, the older you get, the harder it is to drink the Kool-Aid, I think.
Yeah.
It is easier to condition, you know, your 18, 19-year-olds into sort of being, you know, good subjects, good sailors. But at the time, I guess this is where it sort of depends. You know, at the time, the Navy was in sort of a recruiting push. I think this was in 2007 when I joined, and there was sort of a general surge, you know, troop surge going on at the time, and so they were increasing the quotas for all branches to bring people in. In those kinds of conditions, they really relax a lot of stuff. And 22 is, you know, like under normal circumstances, not too old to go in. But, you know, like I knew guys that were like in their early 30s in boot camp, sort of coming in for the first time, which I don't think would happen today. But they were reaching. And
That's weird, man. How old are you?
I'm 35 now.
35? I'm 36.
Yeah.
I don't feel old, but it's weird to think that, like, if I tried to sign up, they'd be like, no, you're too old. I'm like, it doesn't seem that old, but when you compare it to like an 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, like, it makes sense. But you're just in a different mindset when you're that age.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a smart man, but I am 1,000 times smarter now than I was at 22. And I don't know, maybe that's part of, like you said, drinking the Kool-Aid. Maybe that's why they attempt to get people when they're younger, because you haven't experienced as much life, and you're not willing to just, I mean, you have to essentially give your life to them, right?
Yeah, or at least, be willing to have that be sort of like, if necessary, you're going to do it. Everybody goes in knowing there's especially people going into the Navy, if you're not like a SEAL or an operator or something like that, you go in knowing there's a pretty good chance you're not really going to be in harm's way, but you never know, right? You never know what pops off. And sort of, it's like what you're saying, like being smarter, free thinking, having experience. It's a little bit of a liability, especially when it comes to sort of the training and kind of, mentality conditioning. One thing that was really interesting for me to observe about boot camp was that, it was a really effective form of brainwashing. The methods that they use, the tactics to kind of sort of disconnect you from your previous life or, sort of you in your previous sort of context. One thing that was really tough for me was that you don't get anything to read. You get like two things to read, the recruit manual and the whatever your, religious text of choice is.
Really?
Yeah.
If you had a book, they would throw it away?
Contraband. Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
This is just in boot camp?
Boot camp only. Yeah. This isn't like, on the boat. I read a ton when I was on the boat. But in boot camp, boot camp in the Navy is 8 weeks.
No reading.
I mean, like you can read the recruit manual, but you can't, and so you can read for the 100th time what the uniform standard is when you wear your digital camo, but like you can't read, a story, right? People, I guess a way people would do their best to get around this and hope not to get caught is to have people, family members mail them pages out of books, like photocopied, kind of, one by one. Because if the letter's too fat, the recruit division commander will make you open it in front of them so they can see what it is.
That sounds insane.
That plays a very specific role in kind of like disconnecting you a little bit from, I in some ways the culture at large, sort of like the society that you came from, but also just really controlling the amount of information and the kind of information that you're exposed to for that, sort of very concentrated period of time in which they're really breaking down your identity as an individual. Yeah. One of the things you're always hearing, not just in boot camp, but in the military is don't be an individual. That's sort of, that's an insinuation that you're going your own way and doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. And sort of like rebuilding you back up into this kind of like group, mentality, a kind of larger us, with a very specific them on the other side of it. Yeah,
I mean, I guess I get it. It just sounds crazy because I haven't been through it. But
it is crazy. I'm not disputing that. It is, and it is always wild for me to think about.
Hang on one second. I just want to make sure that mic's not covering your face. Okay, cool.
Is it better if I do that?
Because that would suck if the microphone was in front of your face the whole time.
Maybe I did that on purpose,
Incognito. So what about, so this is 2007. Mm-hmm. So I guess we didn't have smartphones. We still had flip phones. So it's not like you could, what would they do now? Would they say you can't have a cell phone? Because you could read anything you want if you have a cell phone.
Oh yeah, you can't have a cell phone. You can't have personal electronic devices. There's a list of things you're allowed to have. And when you walk into boot camp, like the first night is just wild. It's, you feel like you are kind of dropped into a war zone. Yeah. Like having never seen a real war zone, for suburban 22-year-old kid, it looks like one. And you're just getting shouted at. You have to stay up all night. And one of the things they make you do is put all of your clothes and all of your possessions that you walked in with into a box and mail it home. Huh. And, that includes your cell phone if you brought one. I didn't even bother. But the thing is that like you have very small amount of space to store anything while you're there. And, it's basically for storing all the stuff that they issue you. It's really only for that. But, your rack, your space that you store things, your personal things, is always being torn apart by, people coming by and inspecting, the people that like actually work at boot camp and administer boot camp. There are these teams of roving inspectors that will just walk through people's compartments or whole divisions compartments and just open up racks and throw things around. And if they find contraband, it's sort of a hit against that division.
Lots of push-ups.
Lots of punishment, yeah, push-ups, mountain climbers, just all kinds of different sort of weird workout torture that they make you do.
Did anybody get a sock full of bar soap in the middle of the night? Pillowcase full of bar soap?
Yeah, what they call it, blanket party. Never really large organized. That scene is kind of funny because everybody is like doing it all at once. But there would be little quarrels in the corner, after the RDCs would go home for the night, or there was always somebody, but they weren't always like right there observing, and people would jump out of the racks and kind of run around and, be kids, get in fights, but never anything, like a agreed upon retaliation like that though.
Yeah. You got to go back when you get a chance and listen to an episode I did with my friend Jesse Byron. Like halfway through the episode, he talks about when he went to boot camp, and he tells a story about this guy who tried to kill himself. And Jesse had only been there for like a few days or something, and he was on the night watch when this dude tried to kill himself, and he found him, and the guy was bleeding out, and he had to go find somebody to help him save the guy. He ended up saving his life, but it's given me flashbacks of that. So when you got there and you begin to put yourself in that situation, and you start to learn all these things, did you just say, "Oh fuck, man, what did I do? I want out of here"? Was there any of that?
Oh yeah. I think everybody has that thought, at some point. You certainly have. I think so. Navy boot camp is currently in Great Lakes, Illinois. You fly in Chicago O'Hare, and then they take you on a bus from O'Hare to Great Lakes, and it's sort of the like almost dreamlike sequence that I had kind of moving from that bus ride into actually getting screamed at by everybody sort of as soon as you walk in the door. Is I heard it was like a Muzak, like elevator music cover of September by Earth, Wind and Fire on the bus.
Oh no. So it ruined that for you.
I was just thinking, I was like, this is hilarious. And then, like 5 seconds later, someone like this close to me screaming in my face. And, you're immediately like, oh gosh, what have I done? How long is this going to last? That's usually like, what's also going through your head. But, it for on and off seems like a very bad idea after you've sort of gotten your way in, and you're there for the first week, the second week, you're just sort of miserable. Getting by, there are small wins that you kind of celebrate, but like eating lunch is a nightmare. Like just the way they make you do it. They kind of they file you in, like you have to wait, outside. You're always waiting in lines for things. And so they'll march you in a row, and then you have to stand, like heel to toe outside of any place that you're going to go while they're waiting, getting ready for your division. And so you're just kind of crammed with people like reading the stupid recruit manual. And then they sort of like, all right, go, and sort of rush you in. You go, you get your food, you have 12 minutes to eat it. There's no salt. Like you get some weird salt substitute. I don't know. They have some sodium thing, but like, just everything sucks.
And it's intentional, right?
It's intentional. But then things start to get better as you go on. You get a little more bits of freedom. You get to go to the next, sort of at some point further on in, and like buy something for yourself for the first time. I get to buy my own razor, like they issued me this shitty disposable razor. Oh, now I get to buy a Mach 3 with, the very small amount of money I've been earning while sitting here in this boot camp situation.
Do they give you like your own bank account, like your own Navy bank account? Yeah.
Yeah.
They populate it with money periodically?
Yeah. I think it was either like you could either just open a bank account with like Navy Federal Credit Union, or you come in with a bank account and like fill out what is the equivalent of like a direct deposit form. And so, yeah, they're just direct depositing money that you have no access to.
How much did they pay you when you were in boot camp? It's like 9 cents a day.
Something like that. It felt very small. I think it's the equivalent of an E1 or like the lowest enlisted ranks pay for a couple of months, which is, I want to say like at the time was like $600 a month or something.
It's like minimum wage.
Yeah. If that.
Yeah.
And so it's not like you had a lot of money or anything like that, but but just, again, sort of being in this kind of topsy-turvy world where, like, you're used to just being like, I want a soda. I will walk into the store whenever I feel like it, like, and like you can't even have caffeine, like, it's just feels, those small things that they give you as you kind of move your way through feel so liberating.
So when you look at it now with 10 years of hindsight, can you see why they did it or why they still do it or why all those little things made you feel more like a group as opposed to an individual? Like with that goal in mind, do you see how it was beneficial?
Well, it's beneficial for, it's beneficial if you're building a force that you need to go out and do stuff without questioning.
Yeah.
It's beneficial because, if you're kind of too free thinking, if you're, too much of an individual in any kind of given moment when an order comes through, that you're much less likely to like ask those questions.
Sure.
And in a lot of ways, like boot camp has a built-in fail rate. Like that not everybody, like there's like 80 people to a division. That like some percentage of that isn't gonna make it. Mm-hmm. And there's like no consequences for dropping out of boot camp. It's just sort of you don't get like a bad discharge or anything. They just kind of call it a failure to adjust and like treat it like it never happened.
What was it ever so tough for you that you almost quit?
No, I don't think I was ever in the mindset that I was going to quit, at least at the point of boot camp. Yeah. Though, later on things were a little different and I just got over it. Yeah. But we can get to that. Yeah. But no, in boot camp, I think I was pretty committed to just, challenging myself and making it through. It was something I had never done before. It was unlike anything that I'd ever done before. And, it didn't seem worth it to have come all that way to not do it. And also, like, the brainwashing is effective. I could feel it working on me. Or I like when I was having moments of clarity, kind of looking back, like I see how I was kind of brought into this. Like how that process worked on me and how like how bought in I do feel when I'm kind of like not thinking too hard about it. Yeah. And but it's also super weird. It's a weird thing to kind of have to do, and it's not something a lot of people ever will do. Yeah. To kind of have your freedom sort of like circumscribed like that. I always feel like, or I when I look back on sort of that first night at boot camp, I think it must feel a little bit like kind of like, I don't know, like a kidnapping or something like that, where you now have no control over what happens to you. Yeah. There is you can't, anything you say, you're just going to get shouted at and told to do something else. Like there's zero control, and like your whatever you do, however you're going to sort of be for the next 8 weeks is like totally up to them.
And so were there any hardcore, sadistic, total turd ball, drill sergeant type people? Like were there some people that like that was their goal in life, to just like break you? Like were most of them pretty cool and they're just like, this is my job?
It's interesting. I see things differently now than back then, because a good friend of mine did go to boot camp as an instructor, and so I got to hear his story and sort of like what their motivations are, what's going on through their head. Like, because it does feel very much when you're the recruit, just like, oh, these people just really love being mean to people. They really like to just yell and be angry, and but they're taught to do that. Yeah. But from the recruit's perspective, the new recruit's perspective, it didn't feel like people were being like malicious for the sake of being malicious. They always kind of had at least some sort of "I'm doing this for your own good" sort of presentation. And whether or not that was just a front for their actual sadism, I'm not sure. Like that could definitely have been the case, but they hit it well. Yeah.
Well, so you did boot camp for 8 weeks, and then what happens after that? You get sent somewhere else?
Yeah, you go to school. So there's a system of schools in the Navy, and you go to, at the minimum, A school, and then after that, if you have like a special job, you go to C school. Sort of, like your undergraduate and your graduate level stuff, but it wasn't as long as like a college degree or anything. Yeah. So I went to Virginia Beach in November of 2018 or 2007, and was was at Dam Neck Navy Base in Virginia Beach for almost 2 years, which wasn't typical, but I was kind of on a couple of different sort of hold statuses. And so you go there, and it's like a very light continuation of boot camp in that, when you're brand new, they put you into a very specific barracks building with other new people. Mm-hmm. You're forced to do bullshit watches that don't mean anything, just like in boot camp. They strap a fake gun on you and make you walk around in circles just so you know what it's like to do that, and write down little things on a sheet of paper that mean nothing, but you have to do it perfectly, or you get in trouble. And so they reproduce all that, but you're allowed to have more stuff. But you're forced to wear your uniform almost all the time. You have a lot of musters, like assembly meetings that you have to go to, sort of on a very rigorous schedule. The amount of time that you can spend out, the number of times that you can leave the base in a week, those are all very controlled. And then once you get through a certain amount of time, sort of playing that game, a lot of that starts to you go through different phases. I'm forgetting a lot of the actual lingo that we would have used back then, but you go through different phases of liberty, as they say. Your ability to wear civilian clothes, go off base, drink beer, that kind of stuff.
That's a reward, being able to drink beer.
Yeah. It's or just being allowed to go to places. You can cross, so every time that you enter this barracks building, you're kind of going by one of us standing a bullshit watch. And, if somebody's obviously drunk and they know that this person's on a lower liberty phase, they can sort of detain them, call over someone with actual authority and be like, hey, this guy's drunk and, he's only on phase 1 or something. So, I'm not remembering exactly what those policies were, but you could get in trouble for drinking before hitting a certain phase of liberty.
Gotcha.
That was sort of a reward. It's not so much a reward now you can drink beer. It's just sort of we're lifting stuff off of you. Was sort of more generally the reward in that situation.
Mm-hmm. So the 2 years in Virginia Beach were preparing you for possible combat? No.
I was a pogue, as they say. I guess that's not really a Navy term.
What is that? I've never heard that.
Person other than grunt. That was a Marine term that I think I picked up from the TV show Generation Kill. Okay. I don't know if you ever watched that. Great show. I did intelligence. So my job ultimately turned out being satellite imagery interpreter. And one of the things that we would do very often is just sort of, the military owns a lot of satellites that are, sort of out there circling and taking pictures, and, sort of on a very strict timetable, people are taking that imagery that the satellites take and then transmit back down, looking at, different military bases in other countries and sort of reading the equipment, sort of making note of what is where, here's a Navy base somewhere in Iran, and we know that there's usually 6 boats of this type sitting on this pier. Yesterday there were 6. Oh, today's there's 5. Look around the rest of the docks. Oh, we don't see them on any repair piers. We can assume maybe that thing got out, or not got out, but went underway. And if we're in the area, we might expect to see them there.
Sure.
So there's basically a group of people doing this. And I'm not leaking classified information here, so don't worry about that. I don't think. No, I'm not. And so, there's basically for every ship that's deployed, there's kind of a team of people doing this for different parts of the world, and just kind of uploading it all into a central database and sort of briefing. So
your specific job was to look at those images that the satellites had taken and determine whether or not there was going to be a threat or something? Yeah, just if there was a change at all. Yeah, we would note changes. They didn't necessarily equate to threats, but any change could, be a potential thing to keep an eye out for. But it was strictly naval ships and other things. It didn't have anything to do with land? So we would do stuff on land in school. So in school,
backing up a little bit, the A school portion that I mentioned before, kind of being your undergraduate, and then the C school portion being your sort of specialized training. C school is where, I learned to do like the imagery specific stuff. And there was another school called operational intelligence, and that's where they learned how to do, kind of like briefing and threat tracking. And there was another one, without going into too much detail. And there was another one that was sort of ground specific for people that were like attached to Navy SEAL teams and stuff. And so in school, we would do a lot of, like ground recognition practice where we'd have to look at tanks, like I was at a T-80 or a T-70 or a T-60 or whatever. Mm-hmm. We'd look at planes sitting on tarmac, But for the most part, when we were actually like underway, like when I was operational, it was just boats.
Mm-hmm. But do you have any idea when something? I'm just thinking of when they killed Osama bin Laden. Mm-hmm. Did you have any idea that would happen? I mean, probably not, right? That was probably super top secret. You didn't know it happened until it happened. Were you like? Is that something that you could have been involved with in any way, like determining different factors or different pieces of intelligence that would allow something like that to happen? Does it make sense?
So, like part of the answer to that is that, like there are enlisted jobs and there are officer jobs in intelligence. And, enlisted kind of being the lower like level. Again, if you're thinking about this in sort of a class analysis, there's a whole bunch of enlisted people that are, kind of like your lower wage workers that do more technical down to menial work. And then the officers are really like they're the thinkers, right? And so intel officers would have been more involved in that sort of thing. But, guys doing a job like I used to do would have been involved in, sort of, watching maybe drone footage as it was happening or something like that. But all that comes down to wherever you wind up being stationed. And if you're on a ship like I was, then it's unlikely that you would have been involved.
So why be on a ship though? If you're just looking at images and passing along intel to superiors, why be on a ship? Why is that necessary?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure why they would distribute that to ships in the area. I think it's changing now. They might have seen that, had that same question and started moving towards sort of these like centers, these intelligence centers that kind of do the work and don't necessarily need to be in theater. But I think the idea is that, like when my ship was deployed to like the Gulf of Aden, for example, we would get a lot of assignments of shoots they're doing on the coast of Somalia. And so, like we were right next to the coast of Somalia, so we would have been the first people to see any change.
Gotcha.
And, like maybe that's something that, like in addition to sending off the email to Big Navy, we would then want to like, run over to the captain and be like, oh, hey, like here's some stuff that you should be aware of. That's really the best explanation I can think of as to why they would task ships specifically with it. But it is definitely something I think that they're moving towards, sort of a combined shore facility.
Yeah, it seems like as technology becomes more advanced too, it seems like you wouldn't really need humans to do that. It seems like you could get some sort of like super intelligent network of computers to like evaluate all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, I guess
So what you did, what made that human specific? Like why could some sort of AI not do it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's kind of interesting about mapping and about like imagery analysis in general, something that I learned too as I spend more time like in the industry, like more recently in my job, is that there's a lot of stuff that humans do that the computer really doesn't do very well. And when it comes to imagery analysis, one of the things that computers are very bad at still is pattern recognition. They're good at, like manipulating the image, at doing different kinds of filtering to kind of like make things stand out. They're good at, like counting the number of pixels that have a certain, value or higher, like that kind of stuff. But as far as like that's a boat, like that's a plane. Computers still struggle really hard with that. And I think things, that's going to keep changing. But where the technology stands at the moment, and especially, I guess this would have been 10 years ago or more, computers just aren't capable of that at what we we currently have technologically.
Sure. Okay. And so were you on a boat that was above water, or were you on a submarine?
I was on a boat, or an above-water boat, I guess, a ship. Submarines are often called boats.
You can correct me for the way I'm explaining things, because I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I was on a surface ship. It's called the USS Macon Island. There's nothing wrong with saying where I was stationed. I'm sure that's all public record anyway. Mm-hmm. But I was stationed on the Macon Island. It was a large, basically marine transporter. It was an amphibious assault ship that, if you were to look at it, would look a lot like a small aircraft carrier. Okay. And we would basically cruise around when we were deployed, just cruise around and off the shore of somewhere where maybe we would want to put Marines, or at least threaten to put Marines, with about 2,000 of them and a bunch of supporting aircraft and armored fighting vehicles that are amphibious too. So. Mm-hmm. So,
meaning what? Meaning they can drive in a certain amount of water, or they can float as well?
Yeah, they can float.
And go on land?
Yeah, it's pretty wild to watch.
So it's basically a tank that floats.
Yes, it's like a tank boat, or boat tank, whichever. And they look super sketchy because they get like, when you watch them, they go out onto the shore in this line, and the tops of them are barely visible. You can just kind of see one hatch, like that much of a hatch sticking out of the water, and like one person sort of sticking up out of it, looking around, navigating. Crazy. And it looks super sketchy. Actually, something happened, I think it was late last year, where on my old boat on the Macon Island, they were doing some training exercises where they were landing those exact tank boats, and a couple went down, and they lost all the Marines in them. So it's very dangerous to do, and it's very technically difficult. But
how do they deploy them? Can they just like drive off the deck of the ship?
So the back of the boat sinks. Believe it or not, it's there's a big gate. They call it there's a floodable room, more or less, a big compartment in the back of the boat. Whoa. That has sort of ballast tanks all around it. They can take on water, and the whole thing can just sink down into the water and fill up. Basically make a little like almost a beach within the boat. Huh. And then these things just sort of drive down into it, because there's a ramp that leads into that, until they get deep enough and just start to float on their own, and then shoot right out the back. It's pretty wild to watch the well deck operations, because these things are huge. Like the boat is 860 feet long or something like that. Like several football fields. Mm-hmm. And yet like it can just sink and raise. Not quickly, but on command. Yeah, that's insane. The technology that the government has got to be crazy. The stuff that like regular civilians don't know anything about. I've never heard of that before. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that's not that crazy, but like. Yeah, we're talking World War II technology, really.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Huh. But it's not, it's sort of like, I think in most people's imaginations, you've got, like your aircraft carrier and then a destroyer. And there's really not much in between, like what else would the Navy do? And at this point, given the way that, wars are being fought in general, sort of counter to the old World War II great powers sorts of struggles, these types of boats are becoming more and more used, because they're basically little landing platforms where you can kind of pick special ops up off of them and drop them into Hobyo in Somalia or something like that very quickly.
Well, I mean, you don't even really need boots on the ground as much anymore, right? Can't you just do everything with drones? Isn't that what they do most of the bombing with?
That's what they've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah, right?
It's
not like dudes with guns landing anymore. It's just like, we're going to fly this unmanned aircraft over your city and bomb the shit out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like basically what the Navy is doing, by and large these days, is just deterrence. It's sort of like what was the Roosevelt line? Talk softly and carry a big stick.
Yeah,
just cruising around, showing everybody that we've got this. I mean, really with eyes on China. Like, hey, you guys don't want to fight this, do you?
Just driving around flexing our muscles.
Yeah, flexing all over the South China Sea, and trying to say to kind of the great powers, which really means Iran, Russia, China. Like if you were to try anything, this is what you're looking at. And so, like, on the one hand, it's kind of an interesting job because like at least when I was doing intelligence, we would have to learn about like the geopolitics of these different countries, how their politics kind of interact with each other and with ours, how like a political decision over here could like mean kind of conflict over there. But at the same time, it's also a little demoralizing. So you're like, we're not doing anything, you guys. Like, our job is pretty pointless right now. Because we also understood that all anybody is fighting these war front, like the only axes that these wars are being fought on in the modern era is, drones and special ops. And so, you're just kind of out there not being home for 7 months, missing your family, missing, like just being able to do anything on your own. Yeah. And, having to sleep at work where your boss can just come wake you up whenever they want.
That's not cool, man.
Imagine that. Yeah, imagine having to go to sleep at work and then wake up there and go right back up to the office and do it again.
I'm sleeping, man.
So yeah, it always felt a little strange being out there, sort of doing that kind of work because you were like, am I doing anything? Is this, is there any point to this? I guess, something that would go through my mind doing my like imagery work. I mentioned that we would have to look at like the coast of Somalia, right? Like Somalia is barely a state. It's, certainly not a unified state, and it doesn't have a navy, like as such. What it's got is a bunch of very small fishing boats turned upside down on the beach that, people will drag out and either use to fish or that like, one armed group will drag out and then go hijack an oil tanker with. Yeah. And so we're sitting there on the computer, like counting the number of boats, like looking at the last image, counting that number of boats, looking at the present image and counting that number of boats. And like, did these ones move from here to there? You can't even tell. They're not different, like the whole like practice of doing that, like demands that you have real ships with like hull numbers, things you can identify and recognize. And we're just like, so often you just be like, I don't know, it's like 55, just put that on the report. Like one got turned upside down, like who knows, like you can't say like pier A, pier B. There's no pier. It's just a big stretch of sand and like fishing nets everywhere.
Yeah, I mean that almost is to their benefit, right? That it's unorganized and indiscernible, like. Because then you've just got a number of items on the beach, and it makes it difficult for people like you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just kind of it more just shows you the sort of how this all has moved so dramatically away from the way things used to be carried out. I should say like I don't want to sound. Like, oh, how are we going to do war better? Like they're stopping us from doing war better. I'm an anti-war veteran. Yeah. I don't want to do war any better. And it's not like I was just like, gosh, these guys are frustrating us in our, ability to know everything about their tactics. Yeah. But really, it just sort of like it was more of a kind of a broader realization, like. We kind of have no idea how to fight this fight that we're in right now. Like this sort of global war on terror, or whatever name you want to give it. It feels very counterproductive, wasteful. Almost like is this something that like the U.S. military is even like not just equipped to handle, but should be handling. Or like we don't want. Merchant ships to be, taken over by pirates and like held ransom. Those people are in real danger and often die. But on the other hand, like there's got to be a better model for this. Yeah.
So throughout this whole time that you are stationed on this boat and over there in the Middle East area, you realize what you're doing, which is your job, which is performing a task for United States government.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think about where it was going? Did you, at that point in time, were you like, oh, this is what I'm doing with my life? Did you ever try to just get out of it? Like, what was your mindset throughout that whole time? You seem like a very intelligent individual who would probably be constantly questioning what was going on, regardless of the brainwashing, like what was your mindset the whole time?
Yeah, the brainwashing wasn't durable, at least not on me. It's something that you can kind of notice after a little bit of time. You're like, oh, wait a minute, I don't actually think any of that. But I very quickly became pretty disenchanted. And, I had started with the idea maybe I could do this as a career. It's something that people do for their whole lives, and it's actually a pretty well-paying job at the moment, and or relative to what else is available in the economy. And but just sort of feeling just disrespected so often, feeling like, disrespected within the service, like when you're an enlisted person, you do have to put up with just a lot of people's shit, and there's nothing that you can say about it, and saying anything back is just going to make things way worse. And so you just kind of sit there and get kicked and like, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. And that sucks. If you've got any self-respect and aren't like fully bought into the idea that, this is, some higher purpose stuff. And like I said, we were all, not all of us, but many of us would sort of look at what we were doing and be like, what even is the purpose here? It just feels like we're, like keeping Northrop Grumman in some contracts or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I pretty quickly got off of ever, spending more than a single enlistment in the Navy. And so I actually did work to get out earlier than my contract said. Mm-hmm. One thing that they do for jobs that require things like security clearances or extra training is they make you tack on extra time to your enlistment. So a 4-year enlistment is kind of the standard. It's the baseline. But, like if you're an air traffic controller, for example, you have to get some extra training for that. And they ask you to have a 5-year enlistment. And for my job, they asked me to have a 6-year enlistment. So I was signed up for 6 years. Wow. And I had to work pretty hard and make some friends and contacts outside of my own command, just through people I knew in San Diego. Because I was stationed in San Diego. My boat was sort of, like full-time docked in San Diego, but then we'd deploy out to the Middle East on what they call a Westpac deployment.
Would you go through Panama?
No, actually. I'll digress for a minute. When I'm what they call a plank owner, and a plank owner is somebody who gets stationed on a boat while it's still being built, when it's not quite finished yet, and you're part of sort of the first crew of the boat. The boat was being built on the Northrop Grumman shipyards in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So I shipped from Virginia to Pascagoula, which that was a culture shock. Spending the 8 months in Pascagoula that I did, that was pretty wild. But one of the things that we had to do was take the boat from Mississippi to San Diego, sort of like for its kind of final home port, transfer.
Sure.
And I believe now we could have just gone straight through the Panama Canal. It would have taken us like 5 days. But the canal was being widened at the time. This was in 2009, and was not yet big enough to fit a boat our size.
Damn.
And so we did go all the way around the south end. Well, not the south end of South America. There's Drake's Passage, which is kind of like the tip of Patagonia and kind of the coast of Antarctica, that space in between.
Okay.
But then there's the Strait of Magellan, which is the little waterway between continental South America and the island of Patagonia. So we went through the Strait of Magellan, and that was kind of an all-time experience, I think.
Yeah. Did you get off the boat and like walk around and check stuff out?
No, we did stop at a city just before we hit the strait called Punta Arenas, which is, I believe, on the Chilean side, because the border with Argentina is right there. And some officers got to get off and like go to like there's a statue of Magellan.
What the shit? Only the officers got to get off?
We were all pissed about it. We were like, this is supposed to be like a sailing tradition, you know, like sailors go and like, I don't know, kiss the feet or you know, tickle the armpit of Ferdinand or something like that on their way through the passage. It's you know, we all felt a little gypped, but
yeah, that sucks.
But we did bring on a whole bunch of Chilean officers and I think they were just officers actually, and sort of transited with them, or they transited with us through the Strait of Magellan. And yeah, just like going through the strait was amazing. You know, like you got Patagonia on the south side, you see these glaciers cascading down the side, penguins everywhere. No lie, saw an orca eat a seal. Just like everybody's looking like, oh, there's a seal moving. Like you see like kind of the back of the orca behind it. You're like, oh, what's going on here? And then boom, real Animal Planet shit. And it was a blast. The captain was, you know, getting your retirement too, and he was just kind of like acting as tour guide on the 1MC. Like, oh, there's a glacier on the left. Everybody, take a look. So he was having a good time. We were all digging it. But yeah, so I've never been through the Panama Canal. But I have gone down around South America. And that trip in particular was actually like probably the best trip that I took.
So how many days does that add on if you just were sailing the whole time? Is that like an extra 7 days?
No, I believe that took us a full month and a half or something. Like it was a good amount of time. It wasn't very fast, and you know, I don't know, like there's a lot of continent, a lot of hemisphere to cover.
Yeah, man.
Because the equator doesn't even really, you know, like start until partway down Brazil, and then you have to go almost down to Antarctica to hit that passage. So there's quite a lot of ground to cover, and yeah, I think we left in August and showed up in September. So, you know, between 1 and 2 months was about how long it took. But we weren't operational. We were really not doing much at all. Yeah. Playing a lot of Xbox or practicing guitar or something like that in the offices and reading a lot of books.
What's that like being on the boat for that long? Do you get some sort of weird desire to be on land? Like does it just like gnaw at you being on the water for that long? Or do you just not even notice? Well, you do kind of get into a sort of feeling of not even noticing it. Yeah. You know, it's almost, I don't know if you've read the book Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. It's been a while, but yeah. But you know, like kind of the zany harebrained shit that those guys are all kind of like, you know, doing almost like pulling pranks on each other, but you know, it's just all in this sort of absurdist light. You kind of start to see your life in that same sort of way. Yeah. It's just, you know, the things you do to keep your mind off of the fact that like, yeah, you do want to just be on land and, you know, like have a normal life for a while again. Yeah. Is to just, you know, go into total weird human mode and like pull pranks and just, I don't know. I was keeping a journal, not during this sail around of South America that I was describing, but when I was when I was on my last Westpac deployment, which is basically out to the Persian Gulf and back. And you know, like there was one moment in there where I was talking about this junior officer who came in all excited, you know, and he's just like, game on, you know, and we're all like, what? Like 3 junior sailors knew exactly what he was talking about. And you could tell they're all getting all pumped. And I'm like, hold on a second, guys. Because in my mind, you're like you could always be extended and your 7-month deployment turns into 10. And you're always scared of that happening. So I was just like, I'm like concerned that these guys are like jazzed that we're about to like stay out longer and, you know, like, I don't know, do God's work or something like that. And so, you know, I like cornered somebody and I was like, hey, come on, you got to tell me what is going on here. And, you know, finally he breaks and he's like, okay. So the 1MC song, every morning they play a song on, you know, the loudspeaker to kind of wake everybody up when you're on deployment. And, you know, like it was a Friday and this guy had just gotten such a kick out of the fact that he had convinced them to play the song Friday by Rebecca Black. And I wrote in my journal there, like, I'm
fucking I work with 13-year-old girls. Like, this is awful. But you know, like, that was the kind of shit that they got into to kind of disassociate. That we're all just disassociating ourselves in these really strange ways. You know, it's
just trying to cope with it. For sure.
I mean, all I did was just read a lot. Escaped into that fantasy world. Oh, and I think I beat Guitar Hero like 4 times or something like that. But
Nice.
but yeah, no, it's strange to just kind of be on those long haul isolation sort of periods of your life where you know, like you're not isolated. You're around lots of people that you know really well, but also like your real life is totally like on hold somewhere else.
Yeah, the worst part to me just seems that you're not in control of anything. Like, you can't just freak out and drive 3 states away or something. You know what I mean? You can't just, I'm going to go see Mount Rushmore and just go fucking do it. Like, you are stuck wherever they tell you are to be stuck. Like, I have a friend who is still involved with the Army, and he just got sent somewhere for 6 months. He's got a wife and kids. And I'm just like, what do you think about that, man? Like, you just 6 months of your life, you're not gonna, your kids are going to grow up, man. You got 3 young kids. You're going to miss out on 6 months of their life. I'm like, how do you feel about that? And he's just like, I have to do it. And that just seems so oppressive to me. And I get that's what he signed up for, but oh my God, that's awful. You just like, you don't know what's going to happen. You just have to do whatever they tell you to.
Yeah. And you know, it's like, I say this, you know, like not meaning to like pump myself or any other person that's, you know, like spent time in the service up in any, you know, way, but like it's a kind of mental fortitude that you just kind of have to learn to sort of hang on to. Another thing that I noticed in this journal, I was reading this journal the other night, sort of in preparation for this, just to remind myself of, you know, weird observations that I was making, but and there it went.
You lost it.
I made the aside.
That's all right.
But yeah, it was that, you know, sort of something that I had said was somebody told me a percentage of like completion that we were at, like having done 47 days, we were like 20% or 19% done or something like that. And, you know, I was like so mad at that person for having told me that because I was just trying my hardest to stay ignorant of the passage of time. Yeah. And actually that's one thing that I think has kind of, we're all doing a little bit, not to bring up the pandemic. It's so on everybody's mind. I don't want to like assault anybody in their you know, listening experience with musings on it. But like, it's kind of a mentality that I think we're all feeling a little bit, a kind of like long-term isolation, a deployment kind of mindset in the present where, you know, like I find it so much easier right now to just be ignorant to the passage of time. Like, you know, it would be easier if I worked 7 days like I did when we were deployed because they all run together. You have no idea if a week just started or ended or if you're in the middle of it. And that's fine because like, you know, one day you look up 3, 5, 10 weeks later, you're like, oh my gosh, we're that much further. That's cool. I had no idea. And then, you know, you go back down you put your head back in the sand and pretend like time isn't passing or trying to stay ignorant to it.
It's a form of prison for sure. And I don't want to get into COVID because I'm sick of fucking talking about it. But I feel the same way about that, man. It's like it just won't end. It just goes on and on and on. And it's a form of prison that we can't escape. And it seems like the more you talk about it and the more you dwell on it, the worse it is. And so
yeah, you got to disassociate, you know, it is just so much easier to, you know, I don't know, see it as something completely like, I don't know, almost like it's a movie or something like that. Like it's a story you heard and you're remembering, you're in a long digression in your own mind, remembering something that happened.
Yeah. It's depressing though, cause it's happening in real time. And it's like, I have become more and more aware of time as an element. Like when you really think about it, like you only get a certain amount and you get to choose, you know, what you do with it, whether you learn some skills, watch some movies, hang out with your kids, hang out with a girlfriend or your wife, or go see your grandparents. Like you have 1,000 options every day of what you're going to do with that time. And when we're in a situation like this, we're just like waiting for something to be over. And so many days, I'll just be like getting ready to get in bed. And I'm like, fuck, another day. Like, what did I do today?
Right.
What did I do? You know, it's just another, and I'm just getting older. Mm-hmm. And when you're younger, man, you don't really think about it. You're just in it. And, you know, being 36 now, it's like, it's so cliche to say, but the time really goes by faster the older you get. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you don't do things differently on a daily basis or on a weekly basis or whatever, to like if you get up in the morning and you eat Lucky Charms and then you brush your teeth 46 times and then you drive the exact same way to work, like you're creating rhythms and patterns which may help you cope with life a little bit better, but you're also just throwing weeks and weeks away because everything's the same. Mm-hmm. And I hate that. Mm-hmm. I hate feeling that there's nothing special about today.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. The thing that I was kind of in my own head about this last night, you know, it's just like, I'm not like, it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot to look forward to in the future, or that there is like a future to look forward to necessarily. And I think that's kind of hard. Just trying to, I don't know, challenge that thought in the first place and be like, no, something's going to change, you know, like you're just in the shit right now. Mm-hmm. But also, you know, like, I mean, prior to the pandemic, like things weren't great either, you know. It hasn't been like, it's not like things were like whoop, burp, like that. It's you know, it's not like things took a hard turn all of a sudden. It's just kind of an intensification of the trajectory that was already sort of underway, and you know, that's tough.
Yeah, well, a lot of it too is like I try to compare now to other time periods. And it's like maybe now it just seems so much worse because we don't have that many things that are really that challenging. You know what I mean? Like if you compare the Great Depression or the Industrial Revolution, like you can compare it to 1,000 different things. People only had so many things they could do each day and so many goals to achieve. Now, I don't know, there's just this onslaught of everything all the time. And you always kind of feel like you're missing out on something. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, all anybody had to do was try to make money and not die. You know, like I need to find food today, I need to feed my kids, and I need to not die.
Right.
And that was like a struggle enough. Mm-hmm. And now you're like, oh, fucking, I need to check my Instagram, or, you know, like there's just so many more distractions now. Life isn't as hard as it ever has been. Life is pretty easy.
Yeah.
Living in this country, at least. Like, it's really not that hard.
Yeah. I mean, you know, one of the things that I like to kind of poke back at people who are really, you know, high on the kind of the liberatory power of capitalism or neoliberal capitalism, about how this sort of like, you know, liberates us from the kind of struggle, the subsistence struggle that people had to, you know, deal with prior to us, like in, you know, farming your own plot or being a hunter-gatherer or something like that. And I also don't want to pretend like I'm some kind of like a, you know, a noble savage romanticist, you know, like I'm not like the Jared Diamond type saying, let's go back to the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. But like, you know, like, have you ever been hunting? Like people do that for fun now. It's like,
I know, right?
It's not necessarily, you know, like that we can go to the store, you know, like, is that a great trade for like, you know, like going out on a hunting party every third day with the boys in the village? Like, I don't think so, but you know, like, it's you know, it's not an excuse to say like, oh, let's, you know, like be Luddites, smash technology and go back into sort of, you know, rural hunter-gatherer type societies, but it's also worth thinking about, you know, like how liberatory are some of these things that, you know, that get paraded around as the magic of sort of a capitalist social structure, the way that, you know, the way that we subsist is so much easier, but like, God, it is so much more boring too. And, you know, we're just kind of working jobs now, right? Like that's the struggle. It's getting through your day, sitting in front of a computer, clicking your mouse.
Exactly. And I can't remember if I read it or I heard it on a podcast, but it like really struck me deeply. And I think about it all the time. And it relates to time. and it relates to your time versus money. And when you have a job where somebody pays you $25 an hour, you are essentially selling your life, an hour of your life, for a $25 amount. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so that's what's so weird about how we exist now, is that you're determining how much value your life and your time has. And some people can't they can't do anything about that. I mean, if you have no skills or you have no ambition, you just end up working wherever you work. But like, that's what I feel like a lot of people should ask themselves a lot of times. It's like, is 1 hour of my life worth $15? Because that's what they're paying me. Is that what I'm going to do? You're going to be dead in, another 40, 50 years. Are you going to sell an hour of your life in increments for $15? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the whole the whole notion of work, of selling your labor for, or I guess renting your labor for, the means of subsistence is the terms that, like Marx put it in, is very, soul crushing and demoralizing for individuals. It's, no wonder that it's very difficult for people to, like find meaning in their lives, like when people that, work nice jobs and get to sling takes on the internet, and that's really all they have to do is just sit down in their study, with their monocle and sipping a martini and write about how, actually precarity is good, these people, very few people actually get to have that experience, and everybody else is kind of getting gaslit left and right about this being, sort of the ideal structure for society. And we all know it's fake, but we also sort of feel on a very base level there's very little that any individual can do about it, and that's because there is very little that any individual can do about it. It requires a kind of solidarity, an understanding of kind of we're all experiencing this together. We're all kind of feeling crushed in this way, and it's not, it's not. This isn't something any of us want. It's something that we're all kind of captives to.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is though. I know people who, ideally, or at least what we're told, is that you work your entire life and you make enough money and you put enough in your 401k that you can retire and live out your glory days, sipping martinis with your monocle or whatever. But I know so many people that reach that age and they can't do that. They still need something to do. My dad is a perfect example. He retired at he must have been 57, 58. He started driving Uber. He doesn't need money. He just wanted something to do. There's some innate desire in humans to perform tasks and be appreciated for them or be compensated in one way or another. And I don't know where I'm going with this. I don't know, man. What is better? What could we do differently?
Well, I think what you're sort of gesturing to there is something that everybody feels innately. Marx had a theory for this. Basically, the whole of human history is that man does work on the environment in order to meet his needs. Pardon the gendered language, but those are the words that he used. And he really he and others of the socialist tradition, really have this sort of understanding that humans, in opposition to the way that a far right conservative viewpoint of human desire and human capacity is that if you liberate people from work, they'll all just be lazy and play video games and do nothing. I think that's wrong, and a lot of people have been telling us for some time that people will do this if it's not but if it's not for right now we're doing work because it's the thing that meets our needs, right? So you'll be pushed into any job if the alternative is starving or dying because you can't go to a hospital. But if you just have your needs met, maybe you'll spend more time gaming. I don't know. But I think a lot of people, I think myself included, would, probably go fix, like there's work to do out there, but it's not like, like doing hedge fund index, like trying to tank GameStop. The work is the roads, the buildings, the people don't have houses, like there's so much work to do that's not being done because it's not valued or, like not invested with the kind of value that, like an individual or a collective of individuals that live in a community might see it having. We have to look at it through the lens of a corporation and their profit margin.
Yeah, there are a lot of jobs that should not exist. Hedge fund managers, for sure.
Yeah.
Trading on the stock market, I don't see the intrinsic societal value of that. There are a lot of things that hold no benefit to people as a whole. But because you can make so much money doing them, it exists. And that's the other disappointing part is that when you consolidate wealth in that manner, you're able to influence people who write rules and laws. And so you get in this cycle where you can't really change anything if you're not wealthy. You really only have a card at the table or I forget what analogy I was going with. You really only have a way to influence someone based on how much money you have. I don't think democracy is real.
Right. Well, democracy certainly doesn't feel real in a period of time when, neoliberal capitalism specifically has really, kind of run roughshod over the whole project because, there was a period of time when the welfare state did exist in this country, in a more robust way than it does now. It's interesting to note that it existed in a time when, the global West was at war, in a Cold War with, the communist world, the global East, I suppose, the first versus second worlds. And, it was a struggle to sort of prove to the rest of the world, the third world, if you will, that there was, this system is the best way to improve the lives of other people, of the people in your society. And, 50s, 60s, 70s, you have kind of lots of welfare state policies that, run the gamut from basically fully subsidized colleges and stuff like that to increase the individual capital or I guess just the skills basket that any individual would possess within your country so that country can innovate further and that sort of thing. There are better home loan policies. There are all kinds of stuff, must also be stated, veneered over really racist exclusionary policies at the same time. So this isn't something to venerate or anything like that. But, along come the 80s, moving through the 90s and everything gets disinvested in. And, it is definitely true that, in not even in capitalism, a more welfare-oriented capitalism, a Keynesian kind of system, not in neoliberal capitalism, just in any society, the individual has very little power at all. The individual, sort of confronts the world in a powerless sort of way and only gains power through sort of solidarity and social cohesion and kind of movement building with other people. That's the thing that wealthy people have. They can oh, you need money to eat. Here's some money. You're on my side now, right? Yep, you are. Cool. Let's do that. And just kind of reproduces that all over the place. And you get coalitions sort of ready-made by paying people off and kind of co-opting them onto your side. And when everything gets boiled down to well, some people have tons of money and lots of people don't have a lot of money. It's very easy to divide and conquer or not conquer in a sort of, I don't want to sound conspiratorial and we're all being kind of conquered in a kind of conspiracy theory sort of sense. But power is much easier to wield through money when just some people, 1 or 2 or 1% have most of it.
Well, it's easier to make money when you have money. Once you cross a certain threshold, you can just continue to exponentially grow your bank account or whatever. But also you can't really fault. I mean, I'm not saying capitalism is a great method and I don't think it will last that long, but you can't fault someone for being ambitious and making the right decisions to increase their wealth. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, that's the American dream, is that you have an idea, you figure out how to sell that idea, and then you make money off of it. Some people are much better at it than others. Mm-hmm. And then once you reach a certain level, you can continue to grow it, like we said. But I don't know. Socialism is a dirty word.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it should be or it shouldn't be, mm-hmm. but people have this preconceived notion of what it is and turn it into some fucking Stalin-esque breadline, freezing in the cold idea that everything is everybody's and nobody has anything more than anyone else. Mm-hmm. And that's why it doesn't work in this country, because people have this idea that they work harder than everyone else and that there are always going to be people who are trying to take from them. Mm-hmm. And it is, you can't really overcome it. There's a mindset amongst certain people that helping someone is wrong because they're not trying hard enough. It's weird.
I'd be curious to see I don't know if such a poll exists, but I'd be curious to see if people would respond to a question that is kind of constructed in that way, like, is helping someone wrong? Or like, is helping someone who can't or won't, I think won't is specific, like, should be focused on there, who won't work, like, to their full potential as you see it. Mm-hmm. Is it wrong to help them? Yeah. I think a lot of people would say you should still help them. But that's just conjecture. I don't know. But I think you're absolutely right about, socialism being a dirty word. And I resisted that conclusion for some time because I don't want it to be true.
Yeah.
I want to be able to be like, no, the socialism can work here and we're going to do it. And everybody like socialism's good, right? But the specific historical, dynamics of the United States, I think have sort of shown us and created the conditions as such that it is just seen negatively. And there's really not a whole lot that, anybody who advocates for, like a socialist politics can really, you can't deny that. And so one thing that I think is very interesting that I've heard some more, discussion about and some polling numbers about is like, if you say things like, I want to institute a socialist healthcare policy versus I think everybody should get free healthcare from the government. Like one of those, the first socialist healthcare policy polls very poorly. Mm-hmm. Free shit from the government, free insert anything here from the government polls really well. So, I actually don't think we need to be talking about socialism in America anymore. Let's just get rid of that word. It's fine. I'm not married to it. I don't need it. Just say like, we need free shit from the government. And when someone comes back around and being like, hey, that guy's trying to do socialism. I'm not saying anything about socialism.
Yeah.
I'm just saying you should get free shit from the government because we're the richest country in the world.
There are certain things that you should provide for people and help them out with, because I'm not a financial person. I don't understand all the specifics behind it, but there's got to be somebody smarter than me that can explain it. If you help people and bring everyone to a certain level, it benefits society. If you allow things to continue as they are, then you have people who need to steal things to feed their family, who will break in your car and steal your stereo. You've got a ridiculous amount of people who have nothing, who are sleeping in tents underneath bridges all over Portland. Mm-hmm. You have to figure out a way to help these people because it's fucking ruining it for everyone else. And I don't know what all of those steps are to take, but it doesn't mean you're creating a disservice to society if you offer a portion of your paycheck to help out other people who may be mentally ill or maybe lost their job. Like there's a number of reasons you could help somebody, and there is just this over politicizing. Everything has become so politicized. Like even COVID, it's fucking ridiculous. Wearing masks, you know, like everything is a left or right slant, or has a left or right slant, and that benefits people who are in charge of those institutions or those parties, because they can use it against other people. And that's the disappointing thing, is like not everything has to be political. Like you can just, like you said, if you just ask somebody, is it wrong to help somebody? No one's gonna say, is it wrong to help somebody? Yes. You know, no one's gonna say that.
Right.
You know, you just have to rephrase it a different way.
Yeah, I think part of it is kind of reimagining these kinds of reimagining these conversations in a way that feel less overtly like tied to a political identity specifically, like, you know, tied to like something that is typically Democrat or typically Republican, and just kind of get more back down to like a individual values kind of thing. And we speak almost entirely, like values have been completely scrubbed from our political dialogue these days. We're almost never talking about them in such a specific way. But, you know, like one of the things that's, you know, in the Constitution, or, you know, I think in a lot of constitutions is, you know, a right to life, liberty, and happiness. Now, you know, like what is required for life, right? You need food, you need shelter, you need somebody to take care of you when you're sick. You know, like those three, like if you just extrapolate one step out from like person has a right to life, you know, like, oh, well, then they have a right to these other things, because if they don't have these things, then they're not going to live. And, you know, once you go even further, you can, you know, do that exercise even further out. And so, you know, it's so easy right now to just sort of speak in these high abstractions about, you know, like whether or not, you know, there is or is not a deserving poor or something like that. And instead to just ask, like, should a person who just doesn't want to work, should they just die? Like, is that okay? Is it okay for that person to just die? And, you know, like it's on the one hand, it kind of feels almost like a trolling question, but it's a serious one. It's one in which, like, if you take seriously the idea that, you know, there shouldn't be a robust welfare state, and, you know, like people shouldn't have access to, you know, food if they simply, you know, won't work, you know, like even, let's take the worst example. They won't work. They just refuse to do it. Should that person be given a death sentence, you know? Yeah. And people don't see it in that way. It's been very obscured from that kind of sort of, again, a kind of values way of looking at it. Do we value a human life regardless of its sort of worth in the economy? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also an inability to take these current laws and rules and regulations that were written some 300 years ago on fucking parchment paper
by lawyers
with the feather,
by the way.
Yeah, it's like, how long are we going to pretend that is the 10 Commandments for this country, and that nothing has changed? Like, we drive cars, we have computers in our pockets that can answer any question you have. We fly in airplanes. We have an unbelievable amount of technology that is different from when they wrote those documents in 1776 or 1780, whenever it was, you know.
I don't know the date. I don't know. Maybe James Madison had some very advanced opinions on Twitter mobs and cancel culture. We don't know. That might have been one of the Federalist Papers, one of the less read.
It's so insane that we're still like, the Constitution. It's like, do you know how much has changed since then? Like, I mean, iOS for my phone has been updated twice in the last year and a half. Right. Like, why are we still following this document that was written 300 years ago and refusing to change anything about it? Yeah. It's so insane.
Yeah, and, you know, I mean, like, it's, I guess the response to that would be like, well, it can be amended. There's a process for that. But, like, society has evolved in such a way that that's pretty much impossible. You know, like, try to amend the Constitution for any reason right now. It's just not going to happen, you know. And
dude, I went through the amendments the other day. I just went down this wormhole.
You notice how lame they get as you go forward in time?
They're basically not changing anything. The last couple, one of them was like something about when they could vote.
Senator pay raises.
Or something like that. Yeah, it was something so ridiculous. I'm like, who cares? Like, that doesn't do anything. Yeah. The last major one was Prohibition. and the repeal of Prohibition.
Yeah, it has to be like in the here and now. It has to be so benign, that it cannot change society in any way whatsoever.
Yeah,
and I think one of the things that's difficult for people, one of the reasons we have so much, I don't know, a reason why there are a lot of problems and kind of like dissatisfaction with, not just the government, but sort of life in society at large, is that it feels like it can't change. Nothing can change. And yet people, I think, have this understanding that things need to, things really need to move on. People need to feel less, sort of lorded over by their bosses. People need to feel like they have more personal control, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier. How many people that are in poverty, working low wage jobs, maybe too, feel like they even have the time or energy to do the thing that, like a right-wing pundit would say they need to do and, go look for better jobs. And it's a no-win situation. And so, I think one of the reasons why kind of the increase in sort of social strife and a reason why maybe something like COVID becomes politicized in the first place is this kind of feeling of complete disconnection from, like the political possibilities versus, like what needs to happen to just feel better, to not feel like my job could just go away, or if I, don't put up with this just incredible disrespect from my boss, then I no longer can pay my rent.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always something to lose, and that's what keeps you there. It's a fear-based lifestyle, and I don't know, everything that's happened recently is just kind of, it's had a real profound impact on me where I just don't care anymore. Like, I don't want to lose my job right now, but if I went to work tomorrow and my boss said I was fired, I honestly would not care. I don't care. There are so many things happening that are bigger than my job or any part of my life. I don't care because the inability to perform normal life tasks is so oppressive. It's unbearable. You know what I mean? Like,
well, it's like you're supposed to go to your job and kind of do what you were doing prior to the pandemic. Like society hasn't fundamentally turned on a dime, or not turned on a dime, but as I said before, kind of quickly declined even further, or at least your outlook on the social situation. Pretend like that hasn't happened and perform like you were, 2019.
Exactly. Well, and based on which state you live in, the rules are different.
Yeah.
I mean, you have governors with an immense amount of power to decide who can and cannot operate and who can and cannot go to school. And it's just so weird, man. It's it's unprecedented.
Yeah. Yeah, and just the feeling like nobody knows what to do. Even the people in charge don't know what to do.
No, of course they don't.
I remember somebody saying that, like pointing out that one state was sort of like increasing their restrictions and a neighboring state was decreasing their restrictions.
Yeah.
But the state that was increasing their restrictions allowed more people in a single gathering than the state that was decreasing their restrictions. And so
for an imaginary line.
Yeah, exactly. All those
same things happening in the Portland area. Like Multnomah County has been far more restrictive on a ton of different things. There are counties that butt right up to Multnomah County. It's an imaginary line. And Multnomah County is held at a different standard than everything else. It does not make any sense. I mean, they're trying to pull data from the numbers based on who is reporting that they got sick in a certain county, but like, it's not like nobody's traveling across those counties.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like, I would love to read the history book in 50 years about what's going on now. Because like, no one knows what they're doing.
Right. Yeah.
No one knows.
How would they disguise that, right? That's one question I wonder, because a lot of the time we read some pretty sanitized history and we don't even know it, Yeah. How will this be spun by the great centrist historians of the future?
Yeah, when
see this as, how can we make it seem like people actually did know what they were doing?
Yeah, like when Columbus showed up and brought great treats for all the Indians.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So we went off on a tangent, which was a good tangent, but
I'm all about it.
Since We're at about 1:40 right now. We're gonna wrap it up in the next 15 or so. I want to try to get back to. We were talking about you you avoided the Panama Canal and went down south, and then you came back.
Mm-hmm.
And so you said you were on a 6-month contract.
6-year.
6-year contract.
Yes.
And then at that point you knew you were done. You were getting out.
Yeah, it was within the first couple of years, I think, that I felt like I was, sort of really over it. I had seen what there was to offer there, understood fully, and didn't want any part of it. It was really hard. I mean, like, I'm pretty self-critical, and I'm always sort of like, yeah, I was a pretty shitty person, or not a shitty person, but kind of a shitty kid, kind of disrespectful, sort of didn't really look up to the things you're supposed to look up to very well, or, with reverence or anything like that. So I just, I wanted to be myself. I wanted to be an individual.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and through some friends, I was particularly plugged into the San Diego cycling community at the time.
Bicycles?
Yeah, hipsters on bikes, and
nice.
And met a guy who's a chief, a personnel chief, who basically walked me through the process of shortening my contract by a year when nobody else in my command would do it. They were all because it's like Big Navy wants to get rid of personnel. They've got a payroll crisis, more or less, going on. They've got more people than they can afford to pay for what they need. Because I mentioned at the beginning of this that I was brought in, or I enlisted during a kind of a push.
Yeah.
Well, I got out during a squeeze when they were trying to get rid of people. Okay. And there were involuntary separations that they were doing where basically oh, your evaluation was pretty bad this year. Sorry, you're not in anymore. Was pretty bad for a lot of people that wanted a career in it.
Yeah.
But then they had voluntary ones too. And, your ship was almost never incentivized to let you go voluntarily. So everybody was stonewalling me. So I don't know how, it still blows my mind to this day that I managed to, get a chief or two on my side and completely other commands that I knew through my personal life only, to kind of work on this and communicate with the personnel people in Tennessee and, basically get my contract shortened. And I found out, I think year 4.5 that I was going to be getting out at 5,
nice.
Which was, pretty great news.
Yeah.
I found that out while I was deployed. I got back from my deployment in sort of mid 2012 and then got out in September of that year.
Nice.
And
so did you know what you were going to do after that?
Oh no, man, I floated. I was getting at transitioning, the whole adjustment is really rough. And, I had it better than a lot of other people because, I was on a boat. We did weird stuff that didn't necessarily make you really able to deal with a more normal civilian life pattern. Mm-hmm. You wind up having a little bit more anxiety and feeling, things are a lot more serious than they tend to be. Yeah, but that's very difficult and hard to anticipate or even sort of describe.
But you have a specific skill set now, so that's probably beneficial when you're applying for jobs, right?
Yeah, but I had to go to school to fully leverage that because I didn't have a degree when I joined the Navy. Mm-hmm. I was a college dropout, mm-hmm. and so I did eventually go to UCLA for my undergrad. I moved from San Diego with my wife. To Los Angeles. She went and got her master's degree. And then after that, I went to UCLA and got my bachelor's in geography. And, without that degree, it was one of those things where the field is so the field of, geographic information systems and geospatial data analysis is so specialized. You just having experience, is not the most, you really need a degree at the least. But I was ready for that. I went to school with that in mind, or I went into the Navy with the plan in mind of going to school after that, and I wound up turning that money into turning the GI Bill into a bachelor's and master's degree, which is awesome. The GI Bill is a great deal.
Explain that.
The GI Bill is, so it used to be called the Montgomery GI Bill. You would get something like $40,000 for like all of your combined educational expenses. And it wasn't it was a great deal in like 1980, but it's not a great deal in, 2007. So actually when I signed up, they had just transitioned to the post 9/11 GI Bill, which was, I think, introduced by Martin O'Malley, the guy who like ran against Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders in the primary back in 2016. Just
really?
That like Republican kind of like hot dog neck beefcake guy is like, I actually I did the post 9/11 GI Bill. Oh, okay, I'll leave. He wasn't on the scene for very long, but I remember hearing him talk about that. I was like, oh, hey, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the post 9/11 GI Bill is a program that you gain access to after serving after a certain date and for a certain amount of time, and then having a specific kind of discharge, basically honorable discharge. Don't get kicked out for something dumb. Mm-hmm. And then from that point on, when you enroll in a school, the Department of Veteran Affairs pays your tuition straight to the school, and then you get a housing stipend. And so over the 5 years, I believe, that I, used this program to get my bachelor's and then master's, because I did 2 years for my BA, having transferred, and then 3. I was a 3-year master's to my shame. But I was getting paid, I was taking that all the way to the bank, so I was getting paid the whole time. I got about $115,000 out of that.
Damn.
Which is, like I said, a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
And, after getting out of school, like I got a lot of good experience, teaching and doing research and, just doing the things that you get to do in grad school, kind of becoming very, very varied. You're both specializing, but also trying a lot of different things at the same time.
As a 29-year-old, right?
Isn't
that what you said earlier?
Yeah, well, I went into my undergrad as 29-year-old. I think I started my grad school as 31. Uh-huh. But yeah, from 29 to like 34 was basically, just getting free money from the government,
Nice.
It was a great opportunity. It was a really weird kind of like coming to fruition of these plans that I had set in place years and years before. Because you start something like that and like you get 4 years into your enlistment, you remember back like, oh, I joined the Navy because I wanted to go to school. I don't even know if I want to do that anymore. Like this doesn't even seem worth it. Like I want to go be a carpenter or some shit. Yeah. It just, I want to work with my hands. If I've learned anything, I hate sitting at this stupid desk here in this office. Mm-hmm. And yet you can't pass up the opportunity when you get the acceptance letter from UCLA, I guess.
No, that's great. So then did you take your skills as somebody who uses satellite imagery to see boats in Somalia? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Did you take that specialized skill and turn it into a career? Is that kind of what you do now? Yeah,
so the work in the Navy that I did really kind of set up my interest. Like I said earlier, you really need to have an interest in something to like keep going back to the library and like studying it in school. Like you can force yourself, people can force themselves. I'm not very good at that. I need to have a personal interest. And so like international politics, satellite photography, just geographic information systems in general, like computer maps and stuff. It was all stuff that, like kind of my interest got piqued in through that experience of being in the Navy. Mm-hmm. It was something that, like when I was going on about being in like community college or even just before going to San Francisco State, I didn't have any like overriding interests. I picked something because it seemed like it made money. Yeah. But this time, going into it to bring this conversation full circle, going into it as a 29-year-old, having been exposed to the world and been, forced to do something and sort of see options out there. Yeah. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And all I wanted to do was go to school and get a bachelor's degree that proved I know how to do, satellite stuff and get a job doing it. And, why not do a master's at the same time? They'll keep paying me. Sure. I'll be more employable. Mm-hmm. But, ultimately the kind of overriding thought there was like now I know. And now I'm equipped to like actually take advantage of this. Like this is a good investment. This is a good use of my time. And it turned out to be. So, I'm very grateful to have gotten the opportunity to like fail young, get a second chance and try again as an older person because, I can only imagine so many people drop out of college, in their younger years and just never make their way back. And, maybe they feel fulfilled in their whatever careers that they found. Maybe they found a trade or something like that. But I think a lot of people wind up doing shitty customer service and kind of, have a hard time looking back on that choice. And, but for the grace of God go I, it could have been me. Mm-hmm. I could be a barista again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do you do on a day-to-day basis for your job? If you can explain that without being a thing. Is that cool?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So my job is, I guess I would call myself an aerial imagery technician. Photogrammetrist is another term for that. It sort of means like measuring space on the ground using aerial photography. And the firm that I work for makes maps of basically large areas where things are going to be built. So we deal with like the very large scale, like one of our bread and butter project areas is wind farms, solar farms.
Okay.
We do a lot of green energy in Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington, parts of California.
Vestas?
Vestas? I don't know.
You don't know Vestas?
No.
They're a windmill company, or they're an energy company.
I'm not familiar with that company. There are a couple other companies that we work for. One's called Avangrid, which I think works mostly in like Texas right now, but parts of the Midwest. It very well could be. I'm at sort of a part in the process where, like I basically see the name of a project and that's all the information I know about it, know, and sometimes it's a place, one project I worked on was just called Kubler to Delaney, which was the exits Kubler to Delaney over by Enchanted Forest on the 5 freeway.
Gotcha.
So it could be that we work for a company like that, but there are a few competing, like firms that do what we do.
Mm-hmm. So essentially there's a satellite in space orbiting the Earth that you guys probably don't own. You probably use somebody else's satellite, right? It takes an image, you evaluate it and determine how large the area is and where people could install those windmills?
So actually, we don't use satellites. We use planes. We own a couple of planes, Cessnas, like turboprops, with like large format digital cameras that stick down out of the bottom of the plane.
Wow.
And then we'll be contracted to fly over a certain area where something is going to be built. Maybe a freeway overpass or something like that is going to be installed. Maybe, like wind farms, solar farms, or maybe it's just like, a city, like the city of Reading or something like that wants, a big, very high resolution photo of their whole area. But it's like, we're talking such a large area that a single frame wouldn't do it. Yeah. Right. So we take a whole bunch of pictures in sort of oriented in lines, right? So as the plane flies in a straight line, it's snapping pictures incrementally, building a sort of series of photos that are overlapping each other. And then once we get all that imagery in, after it's all taken and kind of goes through processing to have like the color sort of touched up and that sort of thing, then they need to be sort of fit together very perfectly. Yeah. You can't have like a road going and then you go to the other frame and it's sort of like 30 feet to the north of that. And so we will construct 3D models by kind of overlaying adjacent photos and then finding, like places where on the one photo, the same feature exists and saying like, okay, this spot right here is the exact same spot on the ground as this spot over here.
Have you ever used Lightroom?
No, but I believe that's one of those 3D reconstruction softwares, kind of like Agisoft, Metascan, that kind of stuff.
It's just part of the Adobe Creative Suite, like Photoshop.
Yeah,
but it has a panorama that will stitch things together.
Yeah.
I just assume you're doing it on a much larger scale.
Yeah, we use different programs, but it's the same idea. And there's a whole like hobby community of people who do 3D reconstruction with photos of like this beer bottle or something like that. Take pictures of it from a bunch of different directions, and then like hit a button and it'll kind of reconstruct it.
Yeah.
That's more or less the same process that we're doing. I would say that like the sort of beer bottle reconstruction is a newer application of this technology. It used to be done solely from aerial photography for basically creating contour lines for elevation. Just so you can see exactly what the contours of the terrain is, so you know what you need to flatten, what you need to fill, and that kind of thing. And so most of what we do is just kind of like construct these 3D models that someone can look at in a computer space and just sort of see from a kind of bird's eye view and from all around what exactly the undulation of the terrain is. But then also once that data is, once all those photos are stitched together, once exactly, like how close or, like where everything is perfectly aligned, then we send it further down our process line to stuff I don't do yet. But, like people will go in and make 3D line drawings, CAD drawings of whatever's on the ground. Like you need to know that pump jack is right there. You need to know that electrical box is over there.
Whoa.
Draw all the houses, all the curbs, all the paint lines. I mean, it's insane how much time this kind of thing takes. And, a lot of the time we're outsourcing it to, like India, where they can just throw a whole bunch of labor at it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I imagine it's got to be extremely precise, right? Because they're determining where they're going to build items, right? Yeah. So it's got to be perfect.
Yeah. Like transportation jobs are the ones that really blow my mind as far as how precise they need to be. Because like I said, photogrammetry sort of defined as measuring something on the ground from aerial photography. You can't just take a girder that you're going to use to install a bypass.
Yeah.
Or, a freeway overpass. You can't just take that girder out, hold it up and be like, oh, yeah, it looks like it needs to be about there. Cut it there, like draw the line. You need to have that piece already cut perfectly. And if it's like, 6 centimeters short, oops, that's not going to work. You can't add that back either, not easily.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like the precisions that we work with, I mean, in graduate school, you're just, they're like, a couple meters, that's fine, but like we have to be within a centimeter in this job, which is pretty crazy to me.
And what's the largest area you've ever compiled a photo for? Like 10 square miles or something?
That's an interesting question. I'd be curious to know that myself. I guess one of the biggest ones that I've done personally, oh gosh, we do all kinds of stuff up in Washington, sort of taking pictures of rivers and no. Okay, sorry. The fires that were happening this last summer.
Yeah.
We got a lot of contracts for that.
So you were taking photos of areas to determine how big the spread was of the fire?
Yeah, so that people could look sort of at the burn, what was burned and what wasn't burned. But basically, so they could like sort of do an analysis of where they needed to send crews to do deadwood removal or places where there might have been dangerous smoldering conditions. I'm not entirely sure what they use the data for. We don't really do analysis ourselves. We just kind of like, we're the tech guys that sort of like, they're like, we need something that's really hard to get because it requires planes and compilers and photogrammetrists and stuff. We just want your product. And we're like, okay, cool. Well, we don't mess with the analysis, though that would be a lot of fun. I love doing photo analysis, but yeah, really just that was, I don't know, I guess it's easiest for me to like measure the size of an area by the number of photos that we take. And I guess depending on the flying height of the plane, the photo can cover, like an acre to a couple of acres.
Okay.
And I guess the biggest one I've done is 2,500 photos.
Whoa.
And that was Highway 224. that was affected by the fire in this last year.
Wow, that's huge.
It was, and it was wild. You know, like when you're just working, kind of stitching the photos together, like you're actually looking at the photos themselves in a 3D space, and so like, I could see, like these houses when they get run over by a fire, it looks like, they like got bombed or something, like they're exploded more or less. There's just like stuff scattered all around them, kind of burned down to the foundations. It's pretty wild. Yeah, man.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we should wrap it up. So I appreciate you coming up here, hanging out with me.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. It's good times. Thank you.
Thanks.